what I what I think it means for 2024, and then also some specific thoughts about this year and things that we can do this year. I will tell you that I'm this role that I have taken on in the last 6 months of, speaking directly to folks like you and groups like this is new for me. I tend to be a quieter person. I advise politicians and people behind the scenes. And so it's really been a great joy and pleasure for me to be out with all of you. I mean, for all that I gave to you, I think I got as much back from the passion and intensity and love of country that I felt in these meetings. And so thanks to all of you. I mean, I couldn't have done what I did without the fuel and the energy you provided me here over Zoom. Okay, 2022, the red wave didn't come. I wrote a piece in late 2021 saying I thought this was going to be a close competitive election, not a wave election, which was unusual. I thought so for 3 reasons, as I said at the time. First is that the Republicans had made a big mistake in the election by running towards MAGA, a politics that had just been rejected twice by the American people. And it could be very easy that you could be disappointed in Joe Biden, but still have no intention of voting for MAGA. Because what we saw in the polling, even all the way back in the fall of 2021, was that Biden's approval rating had come down, but this thing called the congressional generic, which is this simple question, which are you going to vote Republican or Democrat in Congress, didn't change. And they usually work in parallel. And what that meant was that people may have become disappointed in Biden, but the Republicans weren't gaining any ground. And that's because they, as I said, they made a big error in the election. They ran towards a politics that had just been rejected by the American people in overwhelming numbers in 2 consecutive elections. Usually when you fail twice, you try something new. They didn't. And I felt that was going to create a low ceiling for them. Close competitive election, not a wave. The second reason I was optimistic was that I felt that by the time we had passed our agenda, and if we'd gotten to the other side of COVID, that we could say to the American people that you gave us power to make things better, and we did, and that Joe Biden's been a good president. And I think that enough people felt that it is what also made the election work for us. But the third thing that I predicted, and I hoped perhaps was a better term than predicted, was that the power of the grassroots, that all this money that we're now raising for our candidates, our Senate and House candidates are out raising their Republican counterparts by 2, 3 to 1. We're building campaigns that have never been that we've never had such big campaigns before. And we also have willing volunteers to not only give the money, but write the postcards, do the text, do all the work that's required to combat a noisy right wing. And so I felt that because of the power of the grassroots and this big campaigns we had, that we were going to be able to mitigate what's called midterm drop off, which is when you're the party in power in the first midterm, usually your voters stay home. Well, that didn't happen, right? It didn't happen for a lot of reasons, but most importantly, because of Dobbs and and the radicalization of the Supreme Court, the radical decision of the Supreme Court, which really changed the election. The election was leaning towards being a close competitive election, but when Dobbs happened, things really did change. We had these House special elections, which we did much better than anticipated. The voter registration numbers turned much more democratic. Largely women and young women started registering in much higher numbers all across the country. Our campaigns were raising far more money than the Republicans, which was unanticipated. And then we had the early vote, which was even better than our early vote in 2018 and 2020. And so all these indications that there was intensity on the Democratic side, Tom Bonnier and I, my partner through a lot of this work, we're talking about how we saw this intensity. Democrats were not going to stay home. We were the energized party. And the Republicans in all these intensity measures were actually doing worse than expected. And so we kept arguing this was not going to be a wave election. And then when these flood of polls came in October, right around when I spoke to you last time, the entire media industrial complex, right, tipped into believing this was a red wave. And we were challenging it. I went on Joy Reid and said, if you're reading 538 and you're reading Real Clear Politics, you're reading Republican propaganda. They have flooded the zone with these illicit polls. It was more than 40 polls in 7 states by 10 different pollsters to game the polling averages. And that, in fact, what we were really seeing was a close competitive election, not a wave election. I was heavily criticized for this work. Nate Silver attacked me in his podcast. The people of the Cook Report said I was producing astrology and not analysis. I mean, all the smarty pants in Washington all mocked us and made fun of us, and they were all wrong, and we were right, and thank God. and because we had a terrific election. And what happened in this election was really there were two elections. And those of you who in the West in California know this. We did better than 2020 in most of the battleground. We had a bluer election in the battleground, a redder election outside the battleground. Inside the battleground, where we had these muscular campaigns, we raised our money, where the volunteers went to work, we were able to control the information environment and outperform even Joe Biden's performance in 2020 in Arizona, Colorado, Georgia, Minnesota, Michigan, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania. An extraordinary achievement in a midterm with low approval of the president, high inflation. We gained ground in these critical battleground states. It's an incredible party-wide achievement, and we should be all proud. And I know that you played a role in that, so thanks to all of you. It was amazing. But outside the battleground, where we didn't raise the big money, where we didn't have the big campaigns, we lost ground. We lost ground in California. We lost ground in New York. We lost ground in Texas and in Florida. And so what the lesson is that when we run our big campaigns, when the grassroots of the Democratic Party are motivated and fund our candidates, and we build these muscular, huge campaigns that can do and reach GOTV targets that we've never been able to reach before because the campaigns are so much bigger, that we are in control of our own destiny. We can even gain ground. But where we don't do that, the Republican noise machine and their ability to dictate the terms of the national debate is still very powerful. And so going into 2024, I think what we have to think about is we have to do both. We have to have our muscular campaigns, this new grassroots like your organization that have grown up all across the country, these organic organizations of patriots who just wanted to go fight for their country. We have to keep that going, and you're doing that today. We're doing that together here tonight. But we also have to work more in controlling the national information environment, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So I think as we head into 2024, my basic message is the Democratic Party is strong. We are not weak, and we're not defensive. We're not scared, right? We're strong. We are powerful. We are in control of our own destiny. If Joe Biden runs for re-election, I think he will win. If he doesn't run for re-election, I think we'll have a vigorous primary and we'll still win, because the next generation of Democrats that are coming up are in some ways the best next generation that we've ever had. I know this from having been in this business a long time. I've met many of them. I helped Gavin Newsom get elected mayor of San Francisco 20 years ago now. But if you look at our next generation, Gavin Newsom, Jared Polis, right, Adam Schiff, Cory Booker, Gretchen Whitmer, make your own list of people. It's Hakeem Jeffries now, who's asserting himself as a powerful new voice in our family. We are strong. And this generational turn that Nancy Pelosi began so elegantly by passing the baton to this next generation is the beginning of we're starting to see now the party of the Clintons and Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden is beginning to give way to this next generation. I want all of you to feel confident that that generational transition is going to be successful. I certainly am confident, and I think just the example of Pelosi to Hakeem Jeffries should inspire us that we are understanding the necessity of this generational transition, and we're prepared for it. The second thing is that Joe Biden has been a good president. And he will be a good candidate for re-election, and we should be able to run on the accomplishments of his presidency and win. We can't, the carping and the backbiting and the sort of loss of confidence that was so endemic in our family, and one of the main reasons that I went out among the grassroots to say, hey, we got a shot, we're doing better than you understand. We lost our confidence in 2022 a little bit. We can't ever do that again. It's a luxury that we don't have. We're up against MAGA. We've got to bring it every day and make sure that we're doing everything we can. And remember that we're strong, right? We are not weak. We're not divided. We're strong and united. They're weak. They're divided. We govern well. They're MAGA, right? All these comparisons, we are better than they are, right? And we have to remember that. Finally, is that I'd rather be us than them in every possible way, right? Our campaigns are better. Our next generation is better. Our values are better. Our governing history and agenda are better. And I have this one stat. I do this presentation called With Democrats, Things Get Better that I encourage all of you to watch because it's full of economic data. And one of the core slides in the deck shows that since 1989, Democrats, there have been 47 million jobs created in America. 45 million of those have been created under Democratic presidents, basically all of them. So it's not even a close call in which party has done good for America, left America better than they found it. We've been the good party moving America forward. They've been a party that brought 3 consecutive recessions, now an unprecedented extremism into our politics. And don't be fooled for a second. Ron DeSantis is every bit as MAGA as Donald Trump. They are going to have a very hard time in 2024 creating any distance from MAGA. And in the battleground states, there's been now 3 consecutive elections where people there have voted against MAGA. There's muscle memory in those states that will be very difficult for the Republicans to overcome. Finally, this year, it is critical in my mind that the Democratic Party win the big economic debate that we're about to have with MAGA and the Republicans. The Republicans are going to force a big economic and fiscal conversation. We are, if you look at polling, despite the fact that we have brought about all the jobs that have been created, we've been far better at managing the economy. When Democrats have been in power since 1989, we've had growth, lower deficits, and progress. When Republicans have been in power, we've had recession, spiraling deficits, decline. We have to establish that fundamental contrast in people's minds this year. We have to go on offense on the economy. We have to win the debate. Despite all that we've done on economic issues over the last 35 years, the Republicans still have an advantage over us on the economy. We can't do what we want to do as a national party if we're not winning the economic debate. This is a huge collective strategic priority. I am producing a mountain of economic data for all of you to use in your talking points with your friends, right? And what I want to just ask you to do is to become not only a texter for democracy, a postcard writer for democracy, a door knocker for democracy. I want you to be an information warrior for democracy. The Republicans are louder than we are. This is what I talked about earlier. Their noise machine can take ridiculous things like fentanyl and Halloween candy and turn it into a national discussion. We have to become louder. One of the ways you're loud is through all the conventional ways that we do our grassroots organizing, giving money and all the things I mentioned. But there's one more thing we need to do. They and their side are networked and amplified. When Fox News releases a clip, it goes out to 1 million people. Those 1 million people then send it to their social networks, and it gets reinforced and it reaches tens of millions of people every day. We don't have an analogous system like that on our side. We are not networked and amplified. I'm going to work very hard to try to make sure that we are. But what I'm asking you to do is not wait. There's no reason for you to wait for the National Party or the Biden campaign to give you permission to be an information warrior for democracy. You can do it right now. Start to learn and study the information. Share it with your networks and your friends. Be loud, but not annoying, right? That's really important, right? And when we do this work, you all know this as being grassroots people, right? You have to be, gentle and persuasive and loving and bringing people along. But we commit to me, if you do one thing for the national enterprise this year, be part of this debate about the economy. We have an incredibly strong track record. We shouldn't be losing the debate to these guys. If you want to win in 2024, the most important thing we can do this year is get to a positive place on the economy, and then we'll be going into 2024 in far stronger shape than we are, even as strong as we are today. So those are my thoughts, everybody. I just want to say one final thing, that in my journey that I've been on and working with groups like yours all across the country, I've become very convinced that one of the designs and strategies of Greater MAGA is to produce a relentless amount of negative sentiment into our discourse. They want us to feel bad about ourselves, each other, our country, our leaders, democracy, the United States, everything. They want us to feel bad about everything, right? And I think that got to us a little bit in 2022. I think we did feel bad. I think we have to become more conscious every day about answering their negative sentiment with positive sentiment by putting more positive sentiment in that discourse. When you're about to send off that email to your 20 friends that you talk to about politics, have more of them be positive and sharing positive information and good news rather than always being freaking out about all the crazy stuff that they do. We have to stop talking about them as much as we do. We have to talk more about us. It's critical that we put more positive sentiment into our discourse. We can do this. Democrats are at our best when we're optimists and we believe tomorrow will be better than yesterday. It's our superpower, right? We have to get reacquainted to that superpower as we head into this next election. And then remember, if I can leave you with one overarching theme of this presentation and this discussion is I'd much rather be us than them as we head into the next election. Thanks, everybody, very much. Those are some thoughts. Excited for your questions.
Thank you. Simon, you are such an amazing, we consider you a partner and inspiration to organizations like ours that you do. I know that your family misses you, but a message from us to them is that this is really important work. I love so many of your concepts. Can't wait to see your when Democrats govern, things get better. I hope that you will. If you can give us the link for that, that would be great.
I'll do it.
Send it to me afterward, and we'll broadcast it along with all the other information of the great things your organization is doing. There's a lot of great links and informational centers that you can follow up with Simon. And so we'll be sending that out to all of you afterward as well.
Obviously, we still have a lot more to do, but I'm so proud of this.
Hold on, sorry.
The contrast between
it started playing. Okay,
what
go ahead.
Okay.
No, my presentation started playing and it got into my ear.
Okay. Okay, great. The other thing that, so we have a ton of questions coming. So as Simon told us before, this is his favorite part. So we're not going to overwhelm him. We're going to make him feel loved. So Charlie, you want to get us started?
Sure. Simon, thank you so much. Laurie wants to know, what can we do in California specifically to get more Democrats elected?
Well, you've done a pretty good job, right? I mean, there is almost, there are now more decline to states in California than Republicans, right? I think Republicans are now the third party in California, and you guys have almost wiped out the modern Republican Party in California. It's clear that we have to go win back those House seats that we should have won. I mean, if I get asked in these presentations, where should we be spending our time and money heading into 2024 at the federal level, where your dollars will go the furthest, in my opinion, and there are lots of opinions about this, is that it's in the House races outside the presidential battleground, which includes California and New York, right? And there are a handful of other places, because there's going to be so much money and so much activity in the battleground, the presidential battleground, that there's going to be a lot that those candidates can ride on top of, right? A lot of organization. California is not going to have a major statewide race. These House candidates are basically on their own, right? So the work you can do in California to win back those seats that we should have won is really, really, really important. I think, look, I forecast the last election properly. I didn't predict, because there's no such thing as predictions. People who think they can predict the future are people that you shouldn't listen to, but they can make reasonable guesses. I think we should win the presidency. I think the Senate is going to be very hard, because we have, 3 states where in a presidential year are just going to be tough for us, despite the excellence of our incumbents. But it's Ohio, West Virginia, and Montana. We've got to win all 3 of those to retain the Senate, and they're going to be hard. The House, we should win back. There is a lot of confidence. There are 18 seats that Biden won in 2020 where there are Republicans sitting there. We win those 18 and hold what we have a bigger majority than we had under Nancy Pelosi, right? So, the path for winning back the majority in the House is clear. And the new head of the DCCC, Susan DelBene, is a good friend of mine. She's from West Coaster, Washington State rep, brilliant, honestly, one of the smartest and best members of Congress that I've ever worked with in my 30 years being here. And it's great that she's running the committee. It's going to be a very, very strong DCCC this cycle.
Thank you. We had 3 folks who asked questions about the Senate: Jennifer, Joan, and David. And Joan also wanted to know, how should the media cover Trump? Do you have an opinion about that?
Yeah, I mean, that since Trump has dropped off, and he predicted this, right? I mean, many media organizations have started laying people off, and Trump was a boon, an economic boom for political media in America. It's going to be very difficult for the media to wean themselves from Trump's antics, particularly when he's now going to be back on Twitter and Facebook and all the social media that he'd been banned from. But I think, again, one of the things that we have to do is we have to stop defining our relationship to politics by reacting to what they do every day. What they do every day, the way to think about it, is they jump up and down and wave their arms in the air and scream every day, right, about everything. And we, those of us who've been parents, know that you can't give in to that kind of behavior, right? And we just need to go do our work and make our case for ourselves. Joe Biden, did 10 years of legislating in 2 years. The three big bills that he passed, the infrastructure bill, the climate bill, and the CHIPS bill, are enormous investments in our future that can create, prosperity and for decades to come, and position us to win the economic battles of the future against our rivals. We need to learn about those bills. We need to sell them to our peers, because as we know from polling, nobody has any idea about what Joe Biden did over the last 2 years. The lack of knowledge and understanding of the Democrats and our achievements is significant. And that's why the work that you do in joining me and being an info warrior for democracy and spreading the good news of what we've done, it's really, really important. That's, to me, the biggest job in 2023. In 2024, we start doing more traditional political work. But this year, I hope that you will become, learn the economic data, study the stuff that I do. Center for American Progress puts out a lot of good stuff. The White House is producing far more easily accessible economic data. They use a bunch of my charts from the deck that you see. If you watch what the White House is doing, they've just taken a bunch of my stuff and they use it all the time. I work very closely with the White House to help them sell their economic achievements in a more powerful way. So I think that's the most important thing. We have to do a better job at ignoring them. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. We have to practice that more effectively as Democrats.
Thank you. So helpful. Lori also wants to know about gerrymandering, that it's so huge in the red states. And she's wondering if there's something that we can do to encourage independent citizens commissions and our ranked choice voting.
It's a great question. And I don't know that there's going to be a lot we can do in the next 2 years, other than the fact that there will be redistricting because of court decisions. And I actually haven't gotten up to speed on this, so I know this conceptually, but I don't know the details. There's a possibility the House could flip back to the Democrats in this election cycle based on what happens in the redistricting. It's still very uncertain. The courts, courts are tough for us. The Supreme Court has created kind of crazy orientation towards the election law in the United States. But we shouldn't be as spooked by redistricting as we are as Democrats. I think that yes, we have to win 53% of the vote to win. And that's just the way it's going to be. And part of that has to do, without boring the heck out of everybody, is basically a system that is where you have direct proportional representation will always favor small states and rural areas. It's just a reality that in another conversation, I can walk you through the math behind it. But it's our cross to bear, and in the party, that we are going to have to start, and I'm going to be doing work in the next few months, starting to introduce a concept about what I call the Get to 55 project, which is how do we get to 55% nationally and really break the hold of MAGA over the Republican Party? I think there are 4 pillars to that. I'm not going to give away, I'm still working on this, but look for it. And it's probably 6 weeks away, 8 weeks away from being, but not much further than that. The other thing is that Tom Bonnier and I just had a long talk with Tom today. I did a lot of my analytical work this cycle with Tom from Target Smart. We're going to be starting to release some analysis of the election data from 2022 in March. The reason why I've been a little bit slow is that because, as I said earlier, I don't think this was not a nationalized election. There were at least 2 elections. And so it means the data, the national data, is not as descriptive as it normally is. You have to go into the states. You've got to look at the state data. And so what's happening is the states are releasing what's called the official vote history, where we get to see how, who voted by name, right? By name. And we can look at that. And Tom and I are going to be able to do much more granular analysis through his firm, Target Smart, of what happened in Arizona and Georgia and Minnesota and Michigan, and also what happened in California, right? Where we had a disappointing election. And that's going to be coming out in the spring as well. And we'll be, you'll get lots of notices about that because we're going to be very loud about that analysis when it happens.
Thank you so much. David asks, are you concerned about the risk of an Article 5 convention with only 6 states away?
I'm not sure I know what that is. Explain that to me. What's an Article 5 convention?
Maybe we can come back to that one because
Okay. If he can type into the box, I'm not sure I know what that is.
David, if you would do that. Yeah, please. Thank you. Carol's asking, what are the top 5 polls that you pay attention to?
It's a great question. I'm a nerd, so I read everything, right? And so, but I really like a polling outfit called Navigator. Navigator is a consortium of center-left organizations who poll every 2 weeks, and they produce really easy-to-read graphics. They release a poll every 2 weeks. They often, if you can subscribe to their email, it's called Navigator Research. It's not a firm; it's a consortium. I use their stuff a lot. I really like their stuff, and also it's consistent over time, and you can go back and look at older stuff. So for those of us who need to compare stuff over time, the media polls are all, the media polls, by the way, this last cycle, I will say, in the battle in the red wave, the media polls actually did a pretty good job this cycle. The problem wasn't in the polling, it was in the analysis of the polling. And the media polls actually held up pretty well. They're just, if you haven't read, the New York Times on December 31st wrote an above the fold front page story basically about my battle against the red wave. And it was a really exhaustive piece that they worked on for 6 weeks. And it's an incredible piece of reporting by the New York Times. I learned a lot. Mitch McConnell's chief strategist validated a lot of the arguments that I was making about the election. And one of the things they talk about is how what's happening is that the response rate in polling is getting so low that to get a good sample, it's becoming very expensive. And so basically there's a lot less quality polling than there used to be, which is why we got pushed around by this low quality partisan polling this cycle, which was something that really just wasn't possible in the past. But there's a real crisis. The crisis in polling is that it's just getting really expensive to do good polling, so we're getting less of it. So we have less information. And so I like the NBC poll. I like, I think of the major media polls, the New York Times polling and what Nate Cohn does at the Times, to me, really, they did an exemplary job this last cycle. I think the Times really did some of the best polling, and they spend an incredible amount of money. So they don't do a lot of polling. They did 4 House races, right? But their polling in the House races 2 weeks out was pretty accurate. Their Senate polling was pretty accurate. So I still think I use 538. I don't really trust their averages, but I go there to look at polls. Nate Silver had a big failure this cycle. And you're going to see in this New York Times piece, the Times really beats him up. I beat him up in the Times piece pretty hard. And we now know that because of his failure this cycle, ABC News is considering not re-upping with 538 because of the work we did to call out Nate's failures. It's pretty controversial stuff. I've been in this crazy war with Nate. Nate's attacked me publicly, said I was smoking hopium. Turned out the people smoking hopium were the Republicans, not us, And so, but anyway, go read that New York Times piece. Maybe, Linda, we can put it in the follow-up to everybody. It's really a must-read political story. And it was on December 31st, so it would have been very easy to miss if people were off, having fun. They may have missed it.
Thank you for those recommendations. Maggie's wondering, what are the top things Biden should address in the State of the Union address? And also, what do you think of his making Val Demings a special advisor in his administration to have her focus on the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act?
Yeah, I love Val Demings. I mean, I think she was always going to have a tough road to hoe in Florida. It was a very tough cycle there. I think Biden this year is about 3 things. It's about winning the economic fight and making sure that the economy stays strong. we have to continue to do well in Ukraine and weaken Putin and defend democracy abroad and here at home. And we have to take back the immigration and border debate from the Republicans. I think that Joe Biden, I'm just going to be, my sort of charitable way of describing it is that I think the administration was so busy last year that they just didn't really get to the immigration and border debate. We shouldn't be losing that debate to the Republicans. All they do is jump up and down and wave their arms in the air. They don't really have any solutions for what is actually a very tough and challenging governing problem. I work a lot on the policy side. I do a lot of work on immigration and the border. I've actually advised Gavin Newsom on it and spent time with Gavin about it. California, as you know, has a big border. The largest land. I don't know if people know this, but I'm forgetting the name of it. The south of San Diego is the largest and most trafficked land border crossing in the world, right? And the crossing between, in terms of the number of people who go over it every day. These border issues, relations with Mexico really matter to California and the Southwest. And so I think we've got to go on offense on these issues and really prevent the Republicans from running up the score on an issue that we should be owning as a party. We shouldn't have any fear about running towards immigration. The country has basically decided that immigration is a net positive, that the growing diversity of the country is a net positive. There's a small minority, very vocal, powerful minority that doesn't agree. But as you know, we had that debate in California. And that debate is what turned California into a blue state, right? I mean, Pete Wilson's demonization of immigrants in the 1990s is what opened is what really turned California from a state that had produced very powerful Republican leaders. That was Nixon and Reagan, the place that was the birthplace of the modern anti-tax and you could argue that the entire modern conservative movement really grew out of California. And that state is now the progressive bastion that it is to a great degree because of what happened with immigration. So we have nothing to fear from this debate. The country's with us. Even in the exit polls in this election, there was a basic question, which is immigration basically a net positive or a net negative? It was 53-39 in a midterm electorate, which was much more Republican than the normal, general election. So, we shouldn't fear this debate, and we need to lean into it hard and win it against the Republicans.
Thank you. Nadine wants to know about the grassroots efforts that were garnered in California and how much money was spent. Do we have data on that in California? And was an issue that not enough money was spent on those races?
I think my internet's being a little problematic here. Hold on a second. Okay. I don't really have, I think my answer is, I don't think it was a money. I think that, here's what I'll tell you, right? If this issue of the red wave, the false red wave that happened in the final 3 weeks or month of the election, this was a creation by the Republican Party. In early October, the story of the election, largely because of the work that I had done, was that we were seeing a close competitive election, that Dobbs had changed the election and that women were highly motivated and that Democrats had a lot of passion and intensity. And we saw it in the House special elections. We saw it in Kansas. We saw it in the voter reg numbers. We saw it in the fundraising. We saw it in the early vote. Then we saw it in the early vote. But then these polls happened. And these polls, which were only in 7 states, pushed the polling averages down in all these states. And the media saw the polling averages dropping. The Republicans do what they do, which is they jump up in the air and they wave their arms in the air and they scream, right? And they bullied the media into believing that the election had sort of fundamentally changed. And you heard largely white male commentators on national television saying that, look at this, women really do care more about eggs costing 30 cents more than their loss of their bodily autonomy, right? I mean, there were commentators saying that on the air. And I believe this is an opinion and not something that I know for a fact, that I think the money spent to create this false red wave came from anti-choice sources who didn't want the story of the election to be that the radicalization of the Supreme Court, this 50-year drive to end Roe, had backfired and turned a national uprising against the Republican Party, and that they needed to create a different story, that women weren't actually energized, they were deflated by inflation. How fucking insulting was all of that talk that we heard coming in the national media? Because to believe a red wave was coming, you had to believe that women didn't care about the ending of Roe, right? And so I think that, to me, there were dark forces at work here. And my best explanation for what it was, because Mitch McConnell's guy in this New York Times piece said, we never believed there was a red wave. We didn't want people to believe there was a red wave. We think it actually hurt us in the election. What it did to us, right, the return of the red wave, and the DCCC believes this, is there was money that large donors had committed that didn't come in at the end because they believed the House was gone. And it's my belief that the red wave, the false red wave narrative, cost us the House. And because, as you know, you guys do the work. If you think the House is gone, you move your money to other places. And that's what happened at the end. So this issue of this invented false red wave that I called bullshit on during the election was consequential. It's also consequential because the national media got played. And we need this in the time where truth has become more tenuous, where the right-wing noise machine is more powerful, when the Republican Party has become more illiberal and extreme. We need the media to be there, right? Calling balls and strikes and keeping truth front and center. When the entire national media can get played by 40 polls in 7 states, it was a bad moment for our democracy and for the performance of our national media. And so it's one of the reasons why I'm trying to write a book about this. I have an agent and I'm in the final stages of my book proposal. I'm pretty confident we're going to be able to sell it. I want to tell the story about what I learned during this election. I'm a former TV producer and writer. I worked for ABC News as a young guy. So I grew up in this business. And there was perhaps the greatest media failure covering American politics that we've ever seen in the last year. And as you've noticed, the media is not being very self-reflective about this, right? Well, we have to do that for them and help them understand their failures, because we have to make sure it never happens again.
Thank you. Judith has a question that kind of ties into what you're just saying about how our messaging as Democrats, she's concerned about the right-wing messaging because it's everywhere. And do you have any ideas how we specifically as individuals can combat cities?
So let me tell you a story. So I worked in the war room for Bill Clinton in 1992. I'm in the movie, if you've ever seen it. I was very young and a lot thinner than I am now. And but I worked in the war room. And what the war room was a way of trying to win the information war every day. It was a different way of organizing a presidential campaign, recognizing that national media was changing, and that we needed to run a campaign differently to win the war, in essence, the information war every day. But what the war room was 25 people in a room run by James Carville and George Stephanopoulos, and Tony Blinken, by the way, was in the war room and was part of all this, the Secretary of State, and we sat around we were in one room and we ran the campaign out of that one room. The way to think about the war room today is that we have to be 4 million people going to work, and if you, as one of those 4 million people, can reach 10 people, right, in your network, and 4 million people do that every day, we're reaching 40 million people. The war room is now us. We're the war room. All of us are the war room. And we all have to get louder, amplify. We have to get networked, louder, and amplify the messages coming from the national party. And even if you just reach 10 people, and our networks don't, I mean, somebody raised this in the chat, we don't all talk just to Democrats, right? And we also know that the way to think about this is, let me try to explain this from a communication standpoint. The way we have to rethink communications is that the television age was top down. Your job was to be a couch potato, right? To sit on a couch, consume information. The digital age, you're an amplifier. You touch something, you can spread it through your networks. It's a completely different form of communications, right? The Republicans are networked and amplified. Trump did that. Trump understood this, right? He understood this. We aren't. And so one of the things that all of these groups that you're all part of, right? And there are hundreds of them that have sprung up all over the country. It's the most, in some ways, to me, it's one of the most exciting things that's happening in the Democratic Party, is these self-organized groups that are creating community, lowering the barrier to entry for regular people to get involved in politics, doing it with like-minded friends, feeling like they've made a difference. This is one of the reasons I'm so optimistic. This is a huge new strategic advantage that we have over the Republicans. They don't have this, right? We have this. We have all of you, and all of you have made us much stronger than we were before. And so thank you. But one of the things we all have to do now is we have to take ownership of the national discourse and not feel that it's somebody else's job. It's so amazing to me how many people say, well, you guys, the National Democratic Party, you suck at messaging. Well, don't wait for them, right? That's not what the information age is about. The digital age is about. Do your part as a big citizen, as a proud patriot, as someone who loves your country. Help your peers and colleagues become better informed. And I think that together, the 4 million of us that give money and write the postcards and do the work, we can be louder than them if we choose to be. And I think that's one of my great hopes for us in the next 12 months.
Simon, thank you. I want to be sensitive to Simon's time. Simon, because he has, as last time, I don't know if you remember, but Simon came to us outside his daughter's school. I think it was a middle school. She was in 8th grade. In his car and in the dark. So I want to be sensitive. He's a great family man, incredible strategist. Your communication is just over the top, and you have given us so much to think about. You've inspired us, and we're going to be looking to you about how to take control of the national narrative. We will do our part, but we might need some more guidance and help and inspiration from you in doing it. So if you didn't get your question answered, we'll go through everything in the chat. And if Simon agrees, I'm sure he will, because he's just the kindest and most giving man. If it's a question that we didn't get answered, we'll shoot him an email, and in his time, when he has some relaxing moment, he'll respond to us, hopefully.
Linda, can I make one last comment? So in my With Democrats Things Get Better presentation, which I hope all of you will watch and then share it through all of your networks, because it's I hope it's an inspiring message about the Democratic Party. Here's how I close it, right? It's a spoiler alert here for you Californians, right? Is that what I talk about at the end is the greatness of the Democratic Party and this thing that we're all part of, right? What the world that FDR built after World War II has created a golden age of humankind. More people around the world today have opportunity to achieve their dreams than ever before in all of human history. Women and people of color have opportunities that are unprecedented and have no analog throughout all of our history today. And this world that we built, that our party built, that our party imagined and built, has created the greatest time to be alive in all of human history. We did that. Our party did that. We are the children of FDR and that party. And that work that we did to create this golden age should, I hope, inspire you in the work that we have in front of us. Because what the war in Ukraine is really about is to tear that world down. And I just want you to be aware that if you look back at all of human history, no organized group of people has done more good for more people than the Democratic Party. That's what we're a part of. We have enormous obligations to make sure that world that we built is there for our kids and our grandkids, because it's the greatest gift that any group of people have ever given to the people of the world, I think, in all of human history. The stakes are high. You guys are doing your part. I'm here with you at every step of the way. Just let me know what I can do. And thank you for what you do. Take care, everybody. See you later.